Great. Welcome, everyone, to the Town of Greater Napanee Special Session of Council for the 5th day of March 2026. Just before we call the meeting to order, we just want to remind everyone that this evening's meeting is being live streamed via our YouTube channel. And so welcome to the folks that are here in the council chambers. Welcome to those that are watching at home, and welcome to those that will watch us at a later date. Having said all that, we'll call the meeting to order, and we'll look for a motion on the adoption of the agenda as presented. Moved by Councillor Hicks, second by Councillor Shank. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion is carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? Seeing none. Jump right into this. Items for discussion. Financial and IT Services Report. 2025 Compliant Asset Management Plan required to meet Ontario Regulation 588/17. And Ms. Hamill, are you going to start? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to Council. I appreciate you guys taking extra time today to discuss our updated asset management plan. It is on, but you think you can hear me? So staff have been working in consultation with PSD, who has been our consultants on this project since about this time last year. So it's been a big project. There's been a lot of teamwork that's happened both within our team in the town and also with PSD. Diana and each department has put a lot of work into this plan. So I'm presenting kind of the report to you today, but I'm certainly not something that I carried alone. So thanks to the rest of the team for all of the work that they've done to come together for this. So this project was legislated through OREG 588/17, which applies to all Ontario municipalities and mandates a structured approach to planning, maintaining, funding, and reporting on full life cycle of municipal infrastructure. So this update was the final phase of this regulation, which required that municipalities have a full AMP covering all of our infrastructure assets, and they also had to have proposed levels of service for each asset categories over a period of 10 years. The regulation did have an implementation date of July of 2025, which we did not meet. However, we're happy to say that if this plan is adopted, we will be fully compliant in our asset management legislation, and then we can move forward with our internal planning and use it in funding applications on a go-forward basis. You will see in this plan that the funding deficits illustrated are not insignificant. We have large funding gaps and a lot of assets that need to be maintained. This is not unique to the town of Greater Napanee. It is a problem that all municipalities in the province are facing, but the plan is illustrated to look at a holistic approach of all of the assets that we do have and what a funding strategy could look around that. So we talked about a couple of different scenarios, and the one that we ended up embedding into the plan was intended to be a scenario that was fiscally feasible, although it's not going to maintain the current condition of our assets. So you'll see that the recommendation is 2.5% of an increased investment on our priority assets, but that, as I mentioned, will not maintain the existing condition. You will see the condition of our assets to continue to decline if that is the level of investment that we put in. Of course, if we put in less investment, we're going to see the condition decline even further. But my approach for this was to provide council and provide the municipality with a plan that had some feasibility behind it, and not just illustrate what our funding gap was if we were to maintain our current assets in the condition that they're in. So that's the approach we went. Marissa, who is our consultant, will go into further detail about how this project came to be, the different scenarios that we looked at, and what the outcomes were of that. But just kind of as an overall view, that's the approach that we took. The asset management plan, of course, is a regulatory requirement. It is something that we want to further ingrain into our budgeting processes. We haven't used it heavily in the past, but we'd like to get to a point where we're pointing to it, directing ourselves to it more frequently when it comes to our planning and our budgeting. In addition to the asset management plan, staff do still want to work at looking at like formalized life cycle replacement plans and maintenance plans. So that would be a subsequent document to this. There's a lot that's included in the asset management plan. And for some of our core assets like fleet, we still want to have those life cycle replacement plans to be able to provide to council and to supplement our request come budget time. Unless council has any other questions for me right now, I will turn over to Marissa to go through the plan and her presentation, and we'll have another opportunity for questions anytime through Marissa's plan, unless she tells me she'd prefer to wait, but I expect she'll encourage you to ask questions along the way. Does council have any questions for me before we flip it over to Marissa?
I'm not seeing any, Ellen. Thank you. And I apologize. I should have introduced Marissa. Venezuela's Spencer. Welcome, Marissa, to our council meeting. And whenever you're ready, the floor will be yours.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much. And thank you, Ellen, for the wonderful introduction. As Ellen said, I will be chatting in more detail about the development of the asset management plan and the specifics of it. To do that, I'm just going to share my screen so that you can see a presentation. So just give me one moment and you should see that on your screen. Okay, so it looks like you can see it. Perfect. Okay, so as Ellen introduced, my name is Marisa. I am with PSD Citywide, and I was the lead consultant working with the town on their asset management plan. Today, I'll be walking you through the background of that plan. And to do so, I will be looking at 5 key items. The first is what are some key terms and what is the regulatory overview? Ellen spoke to this a little bit at the onset about Ontario Regulation 58817, and I'll briefly touch on this as well. From there, I'll go into the project and the proposed level of service overview. So what were some of the goals of the project and how did we execute on the project? We'll also provide an update of what we call the current state and how that informed the selection of the proposed level of service options. From there, we'll identify what option was selected, and then we'll go into the financial strategy to support that option, and we'll conclude with a series of recommendations, both financial and non-financial, to support the implementation of the plan. So jumping into the first item, key terms and regulatory overview. Before getting into kind of the specifics, I wanted to ensure that there was a general understanding amongst the group about some of the key terms that I'll be chatting about later on. So one of the main things that you have already heard and that you'll hear throughout this presentation today is level of service. You might be asking, what is a level of service? And so a level of service is a reflection of the performance of assets. There are a few different types of levels of service. Today, we'll be focusing on current levels of service and proposed levels of service. The distinction between the two is that a current level of service reflects the actual performance of a group of assets as of a defined past measurement date. So a simple example might be the condition of the roads as of 2024. Again, that's a past date. This contrasts with what we call proposed levels of service, which reflect forecasted asset performance as of a future date. An example of that might be the average condition of the road network between 2026 and 2035. Proposed level of service will be based on projections using known information like asset in-service date and condition, and then kind of assumptions such as investment levels as an example. What value do proposed levels of service provide? They provide significant value in helping to understand how assets are projected to perform into the future. They very tangibly project and illustrate how different levels of funding, for example, are projected to impact asset condition and risk. This really helps us support long-term planning that isn't kind of looking at a 1 or 2 year window, but is helping to understand how decisions today can impact future circumstances. This again helps to connect performance levels to investment requirements and practically illustrates trade-offs and decisions. Often within the context of levels of service, you'll hear the terms of cost, risk, and performance brought up. The reason for them is that the level of service that an asset provides or the value that it provides is directly impacted by cost, risk, and performance. So if you think about, for example, your own home or your own car, the amount that you're willing to invest in it will directly translate to how well it performs and how much risk it carries. And infrastructure assets are no different. So if you hear kind of these terms come up, that's why. They are really kind of the inputs to your levels of service. Ontario Regulation 58817, those might be some numbers or words that you've heard kind of ringing about over the last several years. So as Ellen mentioned, this is the Ontario regulation that all municipalities within the province are required to abide by. This was implemented with deadlines first arising in 2019, and then a few since then. As Ellen noted, this project is focused on the 2025 requirements. What that focuses is understanding what we call the proposed levels of service. So how you intend your assets to perform, why you selected that level of service, and what the requirements are in terms of the financial requirements to support that, the activities that have to happen to assets to support that, and the risks that that option holds. So at this stage, I will get into the project. You might be asking, okay, how did we answer that question? And I'll walk you through the stages that we conducted the project in. So one of the things we did right at the onset of the project was identify the goals for the project. This was with the project team, and with that, we identified 3 key goals. One was to meet compliance requirements, and 2 and 3 were to increase the use of asset management information as a tool in decision-making. That's something Ellen noted in her introduction, and to also increase staff confidence in the data and information that is used within asset management. And as you'll see in the subsequent slides, all of these goals were met and are very much kind of ingrained into the process. To address this, we looked at 6 key stages. The first stage was the project kickoff and the plan establishment. That's where we identified the goals that I just mentioned. It also is where we confirmed, the responsibilities of the team members and the strategy to execute on the goals. The second stage was very data intensive. This was the data collection, review, and analysis. Within this, there was a few kind of sub-stages. One included a financial focus where we sought to understand what we call sustainable capital investment. So we worked with your finance team to review historical investment to your assets, to understand your investment sources, to understand the amount of investment that is going to assets, and based on that, to determine how much funding we can sustainably kind of assume your assets will be able to receive annually. The second step was verifying and updating asset data and information. This was very, very extensive. It involved the review of over 17,000 individual assets. So as the number implies, 17,000 is not small. This was very much a group effort led with some key players, including Ellen, Diana, and Nathan, where we worked directly with staff to have them review the information on your assets, and in many cases provide some updates. Updates could include things like the condition of assets. It might include attribute data, for example, traffic counts. We also embedded other studies and reports, things like the biannual bridge inspection is an example. That led us to the third stage of the data collection, where we're able to determine updated replacement costs for the entire portfolio, updated condition information, updated risk, and we were also able to determine what we call the optimal investment amount. Following that, we held what we call the discovery session, and the intention of this session is to understand the values and desires of key stakeholder groups. That involves council, and to do that, we issued a council survey. It also involves residents. To obtain that information, we looked at the 2026 budget survey. It also involves key staff who work with your assets day in and out. And to do that, we also issued a staff survey. This was combined with data on your assets that was collected in the previous stage, as well as financial information from the municipality. Based on all of these different sources of information, we were able to select 3 proposed level of service options. And then from there, we entered the 4th stage, which was the modeling of those options. So based on the options, we put into different parameters into the system that helped us understand how assets are projected to change for each scenario. When we look at how they change, we focus on the risks that they're assumed to hold over time, the condition they're projected to be in over time, and the capital investment that's required to support that. Based on that, an option was selected by staff, and the asset management plan, which has been presented today, was completed. So getting into the town's assets and what they're telling us, as mentioned, this was not a small review. This was a very concerted effort in the project. And like Ellen said, it is truly the result of multiple staff across the organization. This here is just a screenshot of your database, which shows nearly 17,000 assets within it. So based on this review, we were able to address some simple but really important questions. One of those questions might be, what is the replacement cost of the portfolio of assets? And so this graph here is showing you that. It's showing you that as of December 2024, there is just over $563 million worth of infrastructure within the town. Most of that is associated with your roads and water, as well as buildings and sanitary network, but still a notable proportion of it is associated with other asset categories. Another question that we were able to address through the data review process was, what's the condition of our assets? So condition is something that's dynamic. It will change over time. This condition is as of December 2024. What you're seeing here is that about 2/3 of the portfolio is considered to be in fair or better condition. Again, condition is something that's dynamic, meaning it will change over time, and it will change and be impacted by decisions like investment levels. But again, as of 2024, this is what we're able to confirm. This next graph here is showing what we call the optimal investment amount. Optimal investment reflects the cost of replacing every single asset once it reaches the end of what we call its estimated useful life, which is how long we generally anticipate that type of asset to last. It also reflects the cost of completing strategic rehabilitations on things like your roads and your bridges, and that's generally pulled from expert studies, typically performed by engineers. And so what this is showing is that on average, you would need to invest about $17 million a year to do those things, to complete those rehabilitations and to replace every single asset when it fails. The data is grouped into 5-year buckets. So you'll see that, within different time periods, there's some fluctuations in the investment requirements. That's generally just reflecting the age of the infrastructure and kind of the cycle of its development. But on an average annual basis, it's about 17 million. We worked with your finance staff to understand what the sustainable capital investment is. It's significantly less than that at about 5 million. And so this helped to kind of put a bit of a framework around where are we now, what's kind of the optimal, and what might be some appropriate scenarios to explore. We then jumped into this third stage of the project. The third stage is what we call the discovery stage. And in this stage, what we're trying to do is understand key sources of information from stakeholder groups, as well as key sources of information about your assets and about your financial position to identify appropriate proposed level of service options. And so in this slide, what we're looking at is the results from your 2026 budget survey that was completed by residents. The survey had over 330 respondents, so it was considered a pretty good sample size. And what you'll see in this graph is that most residents describe the services at the town as good or very good. That's as indicated by the pink and the darker blue colors. When asked about service changes, you'll see that almost all respondents indicated that they at least wanted to maintain, if not enhance, the services available to them. Overall, the majority of respondents indicated that they wanted to maintain services. Another question posed within the budget survey was, would you support a modest tax increase? And so here, what this graph is showing you is that about a similar amount of respondents indicated they would accept a tax increase as would not accept a tax increase. And so what this indicates is that there's essentially mixed sentiment over taxation changes. We also issued a council survey. Here, the intent was to understand councillors' perspective of their constituents and their preferences for investment. This this graph is showing you resident complaints. And so you can see that in all asset categories, complaints are at or below expected levels. So that's good. That's a positive reflection. That means that staff are doing a good job kind of managing the assets that they own. And additionally, staff are responding well to complaints. So this graph is showing by asset category, councillors' perception of how responsive staff are to complaints. And in almost all cases, it's indicated that the staff response is sufficient. This is looking at the capital funding prioritized approach. So here the question was, how would you prefer investment be allocated to assets? And two options were selected by respondents. In 60% of cases, respondents identified increasing investment to top priority categories first, while 40% indicated to just increase investment kind of uniformly across all categories. We also asked council what their perception of taxation changes are in terms of viability. And so what we see here is that between 2 and 6% per year was kind of the identified acceptable range. In more cases, it was kind of closer to the 4 to 5. As mentioned, in addition, we also engage staff. These are staff that work directly with your assets, that have very intimate knowledge of them. They're generally kind of on a daily basis interacting with those assets. We've interviewed, or I should say, surveyed staff based on their area of expertise. So for example, public works looked at assets within public works. And what we found was that most staff have a moderate to high confidence in the data that's used. This makes sense when we consider the efforts that were deployed at the onset of the project to review the asset information. Staff generally identified that across most asset categories, there is insufficient resources, both from a staff and capital investment side of things. Water and wastewater were identified as kind of sufficient for now, but potentially not into the future. When asked about changes in the level of service across every single staff member surveyed, the direction was that we should at least maintain or increase the service level. So based on all of those considerations, which as you can see, were not small, we identified 3 different proposed level of service options. One was looking at the current investment level. So let's understand, if we keep doing what we're doing, what the impacts are. The second was to look at, if we maintain condition, what is required from an investment lens. And then the third was to focus on priority asset categories, which were identified as roads, bridges, and fire, fleet and heavy equipment, and then maintaining the investment for the other asset categories. So ultimately, the direction was for tax-funded assets to go with scenario 3, which is an annual increase to those priority asset categories. As Ellen mentioned, this does not maintain condition, but it does provide for a more financially viable option. For your rate-funded assets, so your water and wastewater, the selected scenario was to maintain the condition based on the average condition as of December 2024. As part of this project, based on that selection of those scenarios, we also looked at the financial strategy. Here, the main questions are, how much funding do we currently have available? So again, that's based on the sustainable funding sources. And then we compare that to how much funding is needed to meet that proposed level of service. Based on that, we're able to calculate what the total tax increase is required to be in order to meet that funding level. And we're able to look at different ways to improve the affordability of it. So this table here is looking at for-year tax funded assets and the selected scenario, which is that increase to your priority categories, what the one-time increase would be. And then if that were to be implemented in a phased-in approach over 5 years, what the annual increase would have to be. And so staff proceeded with looking at the 5-year option, which again represents a 2% increase. Now, when we represent this 2% increase, that means that the 2% would have to go entirely to capital. It also does not factor in inflation. So any kind of annual inflationary adjustments would have to be in addition to that. And it does account for forecasted costs of benefits to existing development. That's based on your development charges background study. When we look at the rate funded assets, the scenario was to maintain conditions, so a little bit more of an investment. Here we see for the water network, the increase required is about 1.8% based on a 10-year phase-in. The assumptions are the same, those being this is an annual increase, does not account for inflation, and it does account for the forecasted benefit to existing. And when we look at water, this is wastewater, I should say. Here, the recommended approach is to phase this in over a longer period of time, considering financial feasibility. That would require a 3.4% annual increase to wastewater rates. So, in conclusion, there is a series of recommendations that have been provided within the asset management plan. As mentioned at the onset, these are both financial and program specific. And so I'll highlight some of them today, but there are some additional ones that are noted within the plan. So a first one is that kind of as an immediate next step, we recommend that council approve by resolution the asset management plan and that they authorize staff to post it on the town's website. This would provide compliance with the regulation. We also recommend that council consider the recommendations of the 2025 and future decisions, especially budget. So as noted at the onset, in order to achieve these levels of service, there will be requirements for investments to assets. And so there's a recommendation to kind of align budget decisions with the decision on the asset management plan. And then as kind of a near-term goal, part of the regulation is that on an annual basis, the municipality has to review their progress in implementing the plan. And so we suggest that that's something that the town begin to plan for. So with that, that concludes my presentation for today. Before I kind of say anything else, I do want to take a moment to say thank you to the town for trusting us on this process, and specifically thank you to the town's team, Ellen, Nathan, and Diana, for entrusting me and working with me on the project. If there's any questions from council, I'm happy to address those.
Thank you, Marissa. Just hang tight and we'll see if council has any questions with respect to your presentation or the report that's in front of us this evening.
Okay.
I'm not seeing anything. Oh, hold on, Mike. Councillor Shank's got a question.
It's a lot to review, all right, as you understand, but just for a small item, when you did culverts, now, was that residential culverts, farm entry culverts, or is this other culverts that were placed in, you know what I mean, as for drainage that are not going to anybody else's property, that is 100% responsibility of the town?
Yeah, so
Go ahead, Marissa.
Okay. Throughout all asset categories, we're only looking at assets that are owned directly by the town. So we wouldn't be including any privately owned culverts.
So the point is, the only reason why I'm asking, I'm not, there's a lot to digest here. So if I go ahead and I put a house up and I have to go ahead and then the ratepayer or the residential person goes ahead and has to buy and place that culvert in at a fee that the municipality places. Now, is that a part of our asset management, that culvert now, even though it's already been paid for by the resident that's placed the culvert in?
So I may defer this to the town. Generally, we would look at assets that meet your tangible capital asset policy. So basically what that means is it looks at the cost of the asset. Usually the threshold is about $5,000. If that asset is ultimately the responsibility of the town to replace, then, and it meets your TCA policy, then it would typically be included. I don't know, Ellen, or if anyone else on the team has anything else to add.
So,
Yeah, well, did Ellen, you want to take a stab at it first before Mike continues?
Yeah, thanks. No, nothing really further to add, just that it would be, so now that we're maintaining our assets in PSD citywide, we would do that as an addition as part of our annual contributed assets, and then it would form part of our ongoing asset management plan with that asset included.
so may I ask, did you do a fleet management plan yet of basically what vehicles need to be replaced in which category to see exactly what is?
Not
Yeah.
that's, sorry to interrupt you, not that's been formally presented to council or completed.
Okay, the only reason why, because when you do your asset management plan, so when you have it such a broad brush approach, like, I don't want to have another heart attack when you read through this of what they're asking. I look at it this way is, yes, okay, fine, we all realize that even municipalities throughout Ontario, you know what I mean, are in the same predicament as this, all right? But if you go to a 2.5%, all right, of just putting back into assets, into fleet and everything over a broad point, and then you have police coming in at 3%, then you have that we have no control over, and then you have another 1 or 0.1 or 0.2% for conservation authorities. You're at 5.5% right off the bat before we even do anything besides to you know what I mean, for ourselves, and we can't sustain. Thank goodness we have assessment growth, but there's got to be, the only way you can solve this problem I can see, all right, which is great to have this, don't get me wrong, it's, you know what I mean, but it's okay, of all the vehicles, you know, which vehicles, what can you do, what can you save, what can't we save, what can we double up on and go that way and dissect it this way here, because when you look at how many are poor and poor shape, yes, we understand that there's we have certain departments that we have older vehicles and, you know, the cost of doing business, but I'm not going to pass any of this tonight. I just like to digest it a little bit more, but that's just my own opinion, but, you know, I just go, wow.
Yeah, go ahead, Alan.
Sure. Just for clarity for council. So we, as part of the recommended resolution, we're not asking council to approve any rate increases, any changes to tax levy, any changes to water rates.
Okay.
None of that is happening tonight. This is simply an illustration of what a financial strategy could look like to support the proposed level of service that are included in the plan. So it is very much an illustration for councils and public's and staff's consideration. We would like to use it to support future recommendations to council, but we are certainly not asking council to approve any increases to any investment tonight.
Okay, thank you. That makes it feels a lot better that way now.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Shank. Councillor Hicks.
Thank you, through you, your worship. Hi, Marissa. Wow, yeah, it's a lot to digest, especially if this isn't your bread and butter. The number 17,000 assets. So if we rent a photocopier, that's not considered an asset. If we own a laptop, that's an asset, and it's to that level. Am I right? It's what you own. So roads, culverts, bridges, trucks, everything right down to the laptop that our treasurer is using at the moment.
Yeah, I'd say, go ahead.
Sorry,
Ellen.
go ahead. It doesn't matter. Go ahead, Marissa.
I'd say that's a fair assessment. So, yeah, it's got those larger assets that, you know, you're driving on, you're getting water from, you're sitting in the building you're in today. For your smaller assets, it would generally include those. Typically, again, we would defer to what we call your TCA policy. So, it would usually include most laptops as they're typically kind of bought in a few at a time. And that would therefore reach the threshold within your TCA policy.
And TCA is total cost of asset?
Sorry,
ownership?
that's your tangible capital asset.
Okay, sorry, tangible, okay, thanks. We had a discussion about acronyms earlier too, so I haven't got them all memorized. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you, Councillor Hicks. Thank you, Marissa. Is there anything else for Marissa? I see Councillor Hicks may have another question. Go
I
ahead,
do have
Ange.
another question. And does it give me the page number? Yes. So page 53 of your report, and this is what I found interesting, was the proposed LOS over 10 years, where it was showing the trend of decreasing. So the asset value is decreasing, for instance, on the road network. And it doesn't show it as increasing. And that's for both the high class and the low class roads. And then you go on to fleet and it's good or very good, poor or very poor. When I read good or very good for fleet decreasing, that's the value of the asset is decreasing over that number of years. But for poor or very poor, it's increasing. Am I understanding that correctly? I'm sorry if I've made a muddle of this. So it's page 53.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just navigating to it to make sure I have looking at the same thing. So if I jump up to that, yeah, so you're looking at page 53 is looking at the average condition.
Average condition, yeah.
Yeah.
5.4.2, proposed level of service over 10 years.
And so your question was,
So when I'm seeing under, so fleet, for instance,
Mhm.
good or very good, 16, poor or very poor, 67. And if I follow that across, I see that that 16 is decreasing
Mhm.
over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
2035. And then I see that the number of assets that are in poor or very poor condition are increasing.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding this the way, okay, so that's the way I was reading it. Okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you for the clarification. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Hicks. Thanks, Marissa. Is there anything else? Go ahead, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. I certainly appreciate, Marissa, all the work that's gone into preparing this report. And I'm sure a lot of our staff have done a lot of work on this as well. But I started looking at this 4 or 5 days ago when I first got it, whenever I first got it, going through this. And to be quite honest, it's very depressing when you read this and the condition that we're in. And I was very surprised to see that we're in the condition we're in. So this 2.5% that we're talking about adding to the budget, is that in addition to what we're doing now? Like, for instance, I think we put, what was it, 1.1 million into northern roadways or whatever this year in the budget? Anyway, we allocated quite a large sum of money.
Yeah, I think Alan can answer that question.
Yeah,
Bill.
so
Go ahead, Alan.
included in the sustainable funding sources is the 1.2 capital levy that we had in this year's budget, which was the same as we had in the former budget. It also includes our gas tax funds that we receive, and it also includes the water and wastewater capital surcharge. So those combined make up the $5 million that Marissa spoke to earlier, and that's our sustainable funding source that is expected within the plan currently, and then it would be increasing investments on top of that.
Thanks, Alan. Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you, Mayor. So, like the roadway network, how did you determine the value of that? Like, so many kilometers is worth so much money, and is that how we determine the value of that asset? A roadway is an asset, right? Correct?
Yeah. I can speak to that if that works for you, Ellen. Yeah, so for your roadway assets, we worked with your team to estimate what we call a unit cost. So it would be a unit cost in this case per meters, based on the road type. And then that's how we determined the replacement cost.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Councilor Martin. Thanks, Marissa. Go ahead, Ange. Councilor Harris.
Thank you, through you, your worship. This isn't actually a question for Marissa, more a question for Ellen. And I know I've seen this at some point in the past year. The tax rate increase over, say, the past 10 years. Is it possible for you, not today, not even this week, but I would be really interested to see a breakdown over the past 25 years since amalgamation? Because the way I understand it is previous councils, and I'm not naming any one particular council in particular, but there wasn't a plan. If that's the way, is that the right word to use, plan? Like, we sat down and we said, okay, we're planning on doing 1.2% is specifically going here, and it's for nothing else. And I'm just curious if that has been done previously, or when it was done, because I don't remember. It was like 2% increase, 2.5% increase. I think the largest one was maybe 3%. And now we've been hit with OPP. We've got all these other things. So I'm just wondering if a summary at some point, now that we're putting this sort of not to bed, but at least on the sheet, if you will, if you would be able to do that for us and maybe give some historical background, because I think when the time comes to do the 2027 budget, that's going to be an important piece of information so that the community understands why we're doing what we're doing, or the next council is doing what they're doing. Just a thought. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor X. I think the question you're sort of aiming for is, I mean, we're looking at this asset management plan. How often these asset management plans occur, and when have they started? We've been doing these things for 20 years, 25 years, and how often do we do them? I guess.
Yeah, okay, so I'll go back to a couple of questions. To Councillor Hicks, certainly we can bring back a history of what the tax rate increases have been year over year for the past 20, 25 years. For asset management plans, they started in 2019, I believe, and Marissa can probably chime in a bit more on this. And there's been phased in increases as part of the Ontario regulation of what kind of milestones we had to hit. This was the last mandated one. At this point in time, there could be future ones that come, but at this point in time, there's nothing further that we need to achieve other than an annual review of the plan. I will say that what a likely recommendation would be from me on a go-forward basis, which is not something that I presented at this point in time, but you see in a number of other municipalities, is you have your regular levy, and then on top of your levy, you have, say, an additional 1% that is a specific capital levy. Ours is kind of built in, but not separated. It's separated on your bill, but it's not kind of in addition to at this point in time. So that could be a recommendation that we would look to provide to council, and this is the type of document that would help me make that recommendation to council when that time comes. So it's very much a for information report that's intended to give us the information that we need to be able to make those future recommendations to council when we're looking at budget and what we want to do to support our capital needs.
Yeah, thanks, Alma. And the reality of it is this asset management plan, I mean, at this point, it's more of a guideline, but it's giving us some form of a direction for future councils to say, listen, this is the state that we're in. This is what, in a perfect world, what we should be doing. It doesn't necessarily mean that's where we're going to end up, but in a perfect world, in order to get to where we should be, this is sort of the plan that we should be following. And if it's just been since 2019 when we've really started doing these things, it almost seems that maybe our provincial partners have suggested that rather than kind of running willy-nilly, we should have a plan, at least on paper, to give us some guidance, whether or not we can follow that or not, because, you know, one year to the next is always a mystery, but whether or not we need to have a plan in place to at least strive for, I guess. Am I sort of close to where I should be with this?
Yeah, certainly. That's correct. Yeah. And that was kind of the intent here was the other option that we could have looked at was building the plan to present a plan that maintained current asset condition. The rates you would see in that would be substantially higher than we're looking at right now. So the approach that staff decided to take was to present one that we thought maybe we would be able to achieve at some point in time. But certainly it's just meant as a guiding tool to be able to provide us with data and aggregate information in a way that we can support the recommendations that we would have in the future. And as we maintain our asset data year over year, and now that it's all embedded in PSD, we can kind of rerun some of the tables and rerun some of the exercises to be able to come up with alternative options if it's not something that we say we look to have it approved in 2027, which I actually don't think is something that we'll be looking at implementing that immediately. However, as you can see in this, the longer you push this out, the bigger the funding gap is going to get. So it's illustrating where our needs are. The other really important part of this plan is the requirement to have it completed for grant applications. So the province is looking for this. They're looking for us to show, okay, where is the need for this particular project that you're looking for funding for? Our wastewater treatment plant, for example, would show in very poor condition. It would show in need of replacement. It would show that we need an investment level that we cannot sustain on our own. So as we make those applications, we need to be able to point to the assets in their current state, their current condition, in hopes of getting additional financial support to be able to conduct those projects, because the municipalities across the province cannot afford to do all of that on the backs of residential taxpayers.
Thanks, Alan. It makes perfect sense now at this point, right? So I think it's a good idea. It's a good plan. And obviously our provincial partners have said, listen, we want to know how we can help you. So put it on paper so we know how you can help you, right? So it makes all the sense in the world. So Councilor Shank.
Thank you very much, Alan. You've calmed me down. So as a plan itself, you know what I mean? Okay, yes. Then I have no problem. I was a little concerned that this was going to go on all on the back of the taxpayers right off the bat. And I'm going, there is no possible way we can do that. But on the brighter note, I travel a lot in province of Ontario and in Quebec and everywhere else. This municipality has put a lot of money over the years into our roads. I know in certain areas, you know what I mean? There is a gap, all right? But you drive into Prince Edward County, go down 49 highway, go on any road, all right, in certain other locations. And tell me if you're not going to lose a leaf spring here or leave that there. So overall, I think we're doing pretty good. Can we always do better? We should strive to always do better and more efficient. And if this is the plan that'll definitely help you, then hey, I'm in favor of that. But as a small municipality, when you compare it to other municipalities, we're doing a lot of right things here. So thank you, though.
Yeah, I agree with you totally, Mike. So is there anything else? And Marissa, were you going to hang around for the rest of the meeting if there isn't anything else, or are you going to be going home to have supper?
I appreciate the invitation. I think I will go home and have supper.
I kind of figured you would say that. So thank you for your time this evening, and thank you for the detailed report. And I'm sure we'll talk in the not too distant future.
Okay. Well, thanks again, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Perfect. Ellen, where do we go from here? Is there anything further? Or are we looking for a motion?
We would be looking for a motion as seen in the staff report if council doesn't have any further questions for us. Just reiterating that the resolution, I'm sure the mayor will read for us here, but isn't looking for increases or approvals to any funding sources or any levies or any rates. We're simply looking for support of the plan, which will guide future recommendations to council.
Perfect. If there is no other questions for Ellen with respect to this, we do have a recommendation that council receive for information, financials, and IT services report 2025 compliant asset management plan required to meet Ontario Regulation 588/17. And further that, as per section 8 of the OREG 588/17, the 2025 compliant asset management plan is endorsed by the executive lead of the municipality. And further that council approve the 2025 compliant asset management plan as attached in Appendix A. And further that council direct staff to submit the final approved asset management plan to the Provincial Ministry of Infrastructure and to make it available to the public via the town's website. Moved by Councillor Hicks, seconded by Councillor Davey. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Do you have a question, Deputy Mayor Calver? Go ahead before we call for the vote.
Thank you, yes. No, just want to say thank you for, after you read through it the fourth time, you start to understand it a little bit more. And I did pick up, I didn't want to see it all going on the taxpayers, as Councillor Schenk was saying there, realizing it is just a direction, but wow, 17,000 assets to go through. These guys did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Calvert. Is there anything else before we call for the vote? If not, all in favor of the motion that's on the floor? Opposed, the motion is carried. Growth and Infrastructure, Ontario Transfer Payment Agreement, Municipal Housing Infrastructure Program, Health and Safety Water Stream. And Christy, I think you're going to speak to that one. When you get settled in, the floor will be yours.
Through your worship, the town, in partnership with the County of Lennox and Addington, was successful in our our funding application through the Municipal Housing Infrastructure Program, Health and Safety Water Street. We are planning to use this funding of nearly $7.7 million, up to nearly $7.7 million, to reconstruct full reconstruction of Center Street from Dundas Street all the way to Isabella, and a portion of Isabella West, so Isabella to West Street. So through that, we're looking to replace all water, sanitary, sewer, and stormwater infrastructure as part of this project. With this, we're hoping to move forward as part of the town and utilities budgets for 2026 with engineering, and hoping to break ground in 2027. Likely will be a phased project over 2 years, but we'll work with the engineers and the contractors when we get to that time to determine the phasing and rerouting and that sort of thing. So what we're here looking for tonight is 2 separate things. We're looking to sign a transfer payment agreement with the province of Ontario to allow us to receive this funding and work with them, sharing information as part of this project. And secondly, we're looking to put together a working document and agreement with the town and the County of Lennox and Addington as part of this project, just to make sure we have everything formally documented. I will just mention there was an error within the staff report. It looks like an update included 2 versions of the town and county agreement attached. So the R1 version is what the finalized version and what you should be looking for, and attached to the bylaw is a copy of the transfer payment agreement if you're looking for more detail. But we're just looking for your authorization to move forward with both of these documents, and I'm certainly available if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Is there any questions or comments with Chris? Go ahead, Councillor Hicks.
Thank you, through you, your worship. Was there any advanced engineering done for this? And do we have preferred, do we have a selection of preferred contractors, if you will, set up for this particular job? I know we did a lot of work like that for the sanitation plant, so I'm just wondering, or the water treatment plant.
So through your worship, we have just started some engineering work. There was a little bit prior to the funding application, but this year's budget allowed us to, the 2026 budget will allow us to move forward and complete the engineering for the project. And with most of our procurement processes, this will be a public tender allowing successful applicants to determine the successful contractor for the project.
And I think Mr. Nobes wants to weigh in as well. So go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Worship, and through to Councilor Hicks. With the wastewater plant, that was a very specialized project. So we did a contractor pre-selection to make sure those contractors were actually capable of performing that work. In this case, it's linear infrastructure replacement. It's pretty routine. So this would be open to essentially the market as a whole.
If I may. The end of that last sentence, and consideration for new traffic lights as required. I'm stressing the consideration, like a lot of consideration needs to be given to new traffic lights there, because it's getting worse by the day. On Center Street, like right from the golf course right out to basically Flying J. Thanks.
Go ahead, Mike.
Through your worship, again to Councilor Hicks. So yeah, the county has confirmed with us that their intention is to build in traffic lights where the pedestrian crossing is currently, replace that. That's an interim measure, and the lights would be installed as a permanent fixture through this project specifically. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Councilor Hicks. Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Thank you, Mr. Nobes. Is there anything else? Councilor Shank.
This is mainly because the public, what we're saying here is a lot of people would say, well, why is the county involved in Center Street? Because isn't that a town road? You know what I mean? Why is the county? But quote me if I'm wrong. All right. I'm 99.9%. That is a county top surface of it, but the infrastructure underneath is municipal. All right. That's the reason why the county is in this grant application, which the municipality applied for. But that's the experience. And my question, that's more for information. Everybody knows that. But I do a lot of business in the north end of town, and I live at the south end of the municipality. So I have a hard enough time, you have a little bit of a rush hour now. And when you start tearing up Center Street, how are you going to bypass the volume of traffic to get south? I know I'll go out the other way and come down through the mouse hole that way, but yeah, nobody will probably understand that. But all I'm saying is, how does the average Joe go down Center Street when Center Street is no longer there for a year or 2 years?
Through your worship, that is the ultimate question on our minds at this moment in time, but there's going to need to be very careful traffic planning to go along with that. We have a substantial amount of time to plan that out, but that is the number one question on our minds right now, and with the county too, is how are we going to accommodate that traffic flow and lessen the burden as much as possible on residential areas east and west of Center Street.
Yeah. One other question that when you're talking to the county, your counterparts at the county, is that as the municipality grows, and we are growing, when you look at through our data management, or what our assessment growth, or what basically our population is growth is that, and you've noticed the traffic, is there going to be an alternative route eventually made to go south besides, because I can see Center Street in 15 or 20 years time, it's going to be backed up immensely. So there's got to be an alternative route, because the only reason why, because you look at the city of Kingston, if I want to get to the other side, at past RMC, thank goodness they put the bridge in when they did, because what it's done. But I can see that same problem happening here in Napanee, because we have the river here. So what are they going to do, or when are they going to do it? I know they've had some preliminary looking past the church on the other side, but it'd be interesting that they're not forgetting about that problem.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, through your worship to Councilor Shank. Yeah, so an EA was done for called the Northwest urban area, where future collector order roads are planned that are going to be under the jurisdiction of the county. But the county is also very soon going to be presenting, county staff will be presenting to county council the county transportation master plan update, which will look into considerations such as that as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, it should be done in the not too distant future, Mike, this traffic management plan. And the one, I think the most recent, or the one that they have was a 2014. Yeah, so it's 10, 11 years overdue. So I'm sure that we'll all be waiting with bated breath to see what the new one's going to say. So, but it should be, I think if I'm not mistaken, it should be done before the end of this term of council. So.
The only reason I mention that is because that's going to be a major cost associated with that. And when you consider what our percentage of the county coffers are, you know what I mean? That they apply for every possible grant, you know what I mean, out of the out of the province, but that's their thing. I know there's going to be a major financial outlay that's going to happen eventually. So when they're doing their asset management that the municipality's doing, that they're doing the same thing at the county, because you know that's going to be coming down the pipe sooner or later. All right, thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Councillor Shank. Is there, Councillor Martin?
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, you said Isabella to West Street? And is Isabella from not going east of 41 or Center Street, then is it? Or are you doing all of Isabella to West Street?
Through your worship, it would be Isabella from Center Street to West Street. So the
Okay,
western
thank you.
portion, there's 2 blocks there.
Thank you. And I had one other thing. So the county share and the town share, I know the town's quite a bit actually. So most of the town share is coming from the user pay group, is it not? Like water and sewer users. So is anything going to the general levy, like sidewalks or curbs or anything at all? Or is that county as well, sidewalks?
Through your worship, the majority of the town portion that we're referring to is utilities. There will be a portion of, I believe, the sidewalk that would be towns, but it's very minimal in comparison to the cost of the project. The majority of this is the utilities portion and the county portion. It seems that Michael might know the exact percentage, but it's slim.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Through your worship, to Councillor Martin, the amount that would be levy borne would be specifically limited to sidewalk work, and it's a very nominal amount at the end of the day.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Councillor Martin. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Christy. And go ahead, Councillor Hicks.
Thank you, through you, your worship. Is there a possibility that Center Street will be widened enough to allow for a decent sized sidewalk? Because right now the sidewalks, especially on the east side, they're not even really wide enough for a scooter. So I'm just wondering, will there be, I know on Richard Street, some people's lawns became a little shorter, their front yards, because they did widen the street to allow for street parking, et cetera. So yeah, I'm just curious how much we can squeeze out of that.
Go ahead, Mr. Knowles.
Thank you, worship, through to Councillor Hicks. So there's no intention on Center Street to expand the limits of the road right of way, the ownership, because it's almost building wall to building wall. There's really no room there. But there is the opportunity to look at overall lane widths, and therefore that would open up more room for sidewalk width.
Okay.
So that would be detailed in the engineering design work, but we would need to consider existing utilities that are in there and relocating them to get them out of the way of the sidewalk. There's a lot that would need to go into it, but yes, both vehicular and pedestrian movement is going to be top of mind in the design efforts that would be underway very shortly.
And if I may, I'm going to say the 2 words that make some people not very happy, but will there be the possibility of bike lanes?
Through your worship, I don't want to commit ourselves to that being a possibility without seeing exactly what the I'll say limitations would be within the road right of way itself and the necessary lane widths. But it's certainly something that will be looked at in detail.
That's all I can ask for, is that it be looked at, because we do want to promote active transportation. And I know the in-town trail will allow for that, the north-south, at least to get you out to Richmond Boulevard. So yeah, but I just wanted to put it out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hicks. And just for clarification in my mind, Michael, it really is a very small section of Center Street that's going to get redone. Most of the work is going to be on Isabella running east and west. Am I correct there? I mean, we're not talking about doing a full city block of Center Street. It's basically going to be where the infrastructure runs across Center Street.
No, through your worship, it's the entire section of Center Street from Dundas Street to Isabella. So it'll be quite a project. And that's why we're looking at how we're going to phase it and reroute traffic and that sort of thing.
Okay, no, I'm glad I asked the question, so thank you. Is there anything else? Seeing none, we do have a recommendation that council receive for information the Growth and Infrastructure Ontario Transfer Payment Agreement Municipal Housing Infrastructure Program Health and Safety Water Stream Report, and further that council pass a bylaw to authorize the mayor and the clerk to execute the Ontario Transfer Payment Agreement Municipal Housing Infrastructure Program Health and Safety Water Stream Funding, and further that council authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the transfer payment agreement on behalf of the corporation, and further that council authorize the mayor and clerk to execute a partnership agreement with the corporation of the County of Lennox and Acton for the reconstruction of Center Street and Isabella Street in Napanee. Moved by Deputy Mayor Calver, second by Councillor Norrie. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Bylaws, bylaw number 2026-0027 to authorize the execution of an Ontario transfer payment agreement. Look for a motion to put it on the floor. Moved by Councillor Davey, second by Councillor Shank. Ready first, second, and finally passed this 5th day of March 2026. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. And a motion to confirm the proceedings for the bylaw for the Council Corporation Town of Greater Napanee. Moved by Deputy Mayor Calver, second by Councillor Martin. Read it first, second, and finally passed this 5th day of March 2026. All in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. And motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Davey, second by Councillor Hicks. If there's no further comments, questions, concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thanks, folks, and we'll see you next week with our regular session of council.